Painkiller Ghosts, Chapter 15. Higgledy-Piggledy, Little Red Hiding Hood, and Van Gogh-to-Hell in the Cornfield. Now it's now, and this is how it is. Chastity sleeps in a t-shirt on the couch in the living room. She slept on more sofas than beds in her life. Behind shut windows with closed curtains, she sleeps in a t-shirt and nothing else. A red t-shirt. She is Little Red Hiding Hood on the sofa in the TV room. Outside the curtain windows, the sun is shining, cars go by, a lawnmower is mowing on the next block down where people still appear to live. A random leaf blower wakes her from her nap. She's wearing a t-shirt and nothing else, and she's staring at the television. Suicide car drivers in Baghdad, explosives strapped to shoppers in Kabul, bazaars, nightclubs being blown up mid-song in Tel Aviv. Bad spinach kills 16 in the Midwest. 12 men found dead 3 miles outside of Mexico City. All of the commercials for hard-on pills. It seems the world around her is dying off in violence, religion, sex, and suicides. She figured a few days ago that there are 2 different types of suicides, the kind where you go alone and the kind where you take people with you. When she was thinking about killing herself, she thought that of the 2 options, she'd kill herself and no one else. And look what happened. She had a victim. She shot a man. She just wanted to kill herself, not hurt anyone else. The first time that she touched herself there was about 5 minutes before the first time she shot a man. The man was chasing her through the woods screaming, "Higgledy-Piggledy, boo-boo, Higgledy-Piggledy, ah," and she responded, "Shooting you is the closest I'll get to sleeping with you." Why was Chastity out there in those woods? It was a dozen years ago now, when she first got her first gun. She had made a decision. She decided never to sleep with a man, but she had to know what an orgasm felt like. She decided it was time. She decided she couldn't do it at home, not here in her small bedroom with her hand-me-down mattress with no box springs and the television on in the other room, and the dishwasher running and a dog barking and the kids playing outside. So she left. She went outside and followed a path into some woods that she had walked through once before and then branched off from the trail. She had worn a skirt, shoes, socks, bra, and shirt, but intentionally left her underwear at home. She laid down, looking up between some spaces of the trees of the fluffy clouds, and then closed her eyes for a minute, 2, put her hands down her skirt, and then opened her eyes, and she saw him coming at her from the bushes. And just as the man tackled her, she screamed and kicked the man off of her, and she got up and ran. She looked back. The man was following her, shouting, "Higgledy-Piggledy, boo-boo, Higgledy-Piggledy, ah!" And she was terrified, and he was chasing her, yelling, bending down every now and then to pick up rocks to throw at her, hitting her once in the back of the head and twice in the back. She ran without looking back, as to avoid a rock hitting her in the face. She grabbed her bag as she got up, the bag which had her revolver in it. She had run the opposite direction from where she had come, and she wished she hadn't because she didn't know this parts of the woods too well, and shortly she found herself leaving the woods and entering into a cornfield. The corn was about ready for harvest. The stalks were up over her head for the most part. The man is not too tall, about her height, maybe in his 40s, with short hair, a reddish beard, and a bandage over one ear. Higgledy-Piggledy, boo-boo, Higgledy-Piggledy, ah, ah. His belt was now undone, his brown leather shoes crushing corn stalks as he stumbled after her. One final rock flew by her head. She yelled for him to back off, to get away. She's lost in the field. She yelled to back off, but he was getting closer. He had almost reached her, and then her foot got wrapped in a fallen corn stalk, and she lost her pace. He grabbed her shoulder, but then he lost his footing too, and stumbled and fell, and she got away for a second. She looked back again, and with the hair and the beard and the bandage, she thought of Vincent van Gogh chasing her through the cornfield. She ran on, trying to find a way out of the corn. She managed to get a few steps ahead after he fell and reached into her bag and rumbled around till she had her fists on the handle of the gun and pulled it out and turned it to the man and shouted for him to "Get out of here, you freaky Van Gogh! Van Gogh to hell!" but he kept coming at her, shouting, "Higgledy-Piggledy, boo-boo, higgledy-piggledy, ah." And then she aimed and she said, "Shooting you is the closest that I'll get to sleeping with you." And she shot him in the stomach, and he fell down screaming, "Boo-boo, boo-boo, ah, ah." Chastity says to herself, "I just shot Van Gogh. I just shot Van Gogh to hell." She ran and looked back. She ran after shooting the man, after indecent exposure, masturbation, and no rape. As she ran, she heard from the field, "Ah, ah, boo, boo." She read a blip in the paper 2 days later that a man was found dead in a field from a gunshot and that there were no leads. She closed the Metro section of the paper and turned on the TV news. I've always been sort of a freak magnet. That was the first time she ever shot a man. That was years ago, before there were 10 war channels, before this war, these wars, those wars, when the main news was over the debate whether the president had inhaled or not, or had too much fun in the Oval Office. Chastity thinks about indecent exposure, masturbation, and shooting Van Gogh to hell in the cornfield. The blood dripped down onto ripped and dirty pants. Demented eyes dying. Bang, rip, drip. Boo boo, ah. Now, she's in the house. On the sofa, in only her red t-shirt, little red hiding hood, hiding from the rest of the world, searching through the channels of static on the television. The sun comes in through some cracks in the curtains, a dog barks, and that leaf blower won't quit. She can't remember if she's eaten today or not. Now it's now, and this is how it is. She's been living in this house for a few months, on the sofa mainly, sometimes sleeping in the bed in nothing but a t-shirt next to the man who has since shot himself. They had befriended each other. His wife had died in a one-car accident a year and a half ago. He asked her to move in, and he knew he wouldn't be having sex with her. He told her that he just wanted a beautiful woman around, and she needed somewhere to live. She was moving into his house before she ever knew his name. She really needed a place to live. She asked him, as she was bringing her bag of clothes from her car, "You know something? I don't even know your name. I know you told me. I just forgot." And he paused and said, "No, don't worry about it. No name." "No name?" He nodded. But they became friends. He called it hell, losing his wife in that crash, and now living with Chastity and falling into lust with her and wanting her, but knowing he would never have her. He always knew he couldn't because she was always telling him that no one could. He had willed the house to her not too long ago, in one of his silent days, when Chastity would hardly see him. Even though they'd both be in the house all day, together, she would hardly see him. And when he did, he would listen to her, but was distracted. Looking back, she thinks he knew that he would end things that way. He might have even had the date planned. She had seen signs recently. He was either really mellow or really angry, and there wasn't much in between. He may scream for an hour and sit there and shout for 1 minute and then punch his fist through the kitchen window. But then he'd be quiet and sit and stare at the wall in his house, looking out the windows at the empty houses on the street, chain smoking cigarettes. He'd be mellow and nothing would bother him. And at first he'd be quiet but sad, and then quiet but basically neutral in feeling. He'd listen to hours on end to Chastity talking, and then he'd get sad, thinking about his late wife, and then just all angry at the world again, and maybe kick a hole in the wall. But he never kicked or hit Chastity, not until that last night. He'd been nothing but kind to her ever since they met. She had recently quit her job, or rather had been fired for not showing up. She needed a place to live. They had met in the grocery store where Time worked, when she was shoplifting tampons and carrots. I'm a virgin, not an angel. He didn't have any children with his late wife, and he had no living parents, and his siblings lived across the country, so he left the house to Chastity in his will. Now, she had a place to live, but no money to pay the bills with next month. After the canned veggies ran out and the power gets cut off, it's time for Plan B, although there was no Plan B. But for now, she has a place to live, a place to call her own. She gets up, finds some sneakers, and puts her hair up in a ponytail. She has decided she needs to go back to the hospital to see if Timothy X. Exler, is still there. She doesn't know why, but she feels that she has to go back and see him. She's walking a few blocks, and a woman about Chastity's age is loading art prints into the back of a station wagon. There are a couple children in the booster seats in the back seat. Chastity strikes up a conversation about the print on top of Van Gogh. She tells the woman she was on the way to visit a friend in the hospital. The weather is a little chilly, fall in Richmond, and there was mention of the distance and of catching a cold, and moments later Chastity is in the front seat of the station wagon being ushered to the hospital. Chastity smiles and says to her host, the gracious driver, "I shot Van Gogh in a cornfield years ago. I shot him dead. I've always been kind of a freak magnet." The driver looks over at Chastity, slows the car to a stop, and raises an eyebrow and nods towards the door. Chastity gets out. Chastity turns and heads back home. If she had gone to the hospital, she would not have been able to find him anyway, as he's been released an hour before. By the time she gets back to the house, it is dark, and Time is back at his mother's house, crushing painkillers over his oatmeal, stirring them into his soup.